what's going on, guys? Welcome back. So, yeah, we got to talk about it. I think at this point, unless you live under a rock, and you're probably not watching my channel, if you do, you already know about this event, I'll say. So, before we get into it, I'm going to talk about it. The first thing I want to do is, I'm not going to apologize, but I'm just say like, hey, I didn't put a video out right away for a few reasons. There's a couple of reasons. One, I was working this incident, so that was consumed a lot of my time for the last few days. Two, I wanted to make sure we had the right information, because initially the wrong information was coming out, and I'm going to talk about that too, because there's still wrong information coming out, and I think it's important that we get the right information out there and not spread the wrong information. So first things first, what actually happened? If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, if you did live under a rock, if you have no clue what I'm talking about, CrowdStrike is a company that is an EDR tool, endpoint detection and response. It sits on machines and it detects and responds to attacks, okay? That looks very different on very different machines all over the world. Now, what happened was they actually caused over 8.5 million in counting systems to crash, okay, across the world. That may sound like a small number, but the majority of those are servers. So understand that's a big number, because it caused global outages all over the world. It was a huge incident. It's still going. It's not done. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about what happened, how it happened, that type of thing. And then we're going to talk about the effects, some questions I even have. I saw John Hammond went on like CNN or something. I didn't watch it. I haven't had time, but maybe he answers them. I doubt it, because he's not a lawyer. He's he's a cybersecurity person, but I have some legal questions. There's a ton to unpack here. A ton. So let's dive into it. So firstly, before we get too deep, hit the like button, hit the sub button if you guys appreciate me actually covering this type of content, because it's kind of out of the norm of my normal content, right? I don't normally do news very often. I do them every now and then if big things happen, but other than that, so I don't know how much you guys like them, if it even helps you or not. So first things, blue screen of death. That's what actually happened. If you guys don't know what the blue screen of death looks like, let's check it out. So blue screen of death. This is what a blue screen of death looks like. Your PC ran into a problem, needs to restart, blah, blah. Now, here's the problem. There was a loop that was happening, meaning your computer would just blue screen every single time it started. Okay, sometimes you'd get this error instead, which is just, looks like Windows didn't load. It's still a blue screen of death, and it would allow you to reboot, basically, right? That's the blue screen of death. So over 8.5 million systems had that happen. So what does that look like? Well, we're going to talk about the timeline and stuff here in a second, but the first thing is the impact. So what happened is every Windows machine that had CrowdStrike installed, okay, that was online at the time, was pushed a sys file. Okay, the sys file is these channel files, okay, and you can see it's just a .sys extension. These channel files are almost like, if you know how antivirus works, like signatures. They are files that they put in there that detect certain behaviors, patterns, signatures, things like that. It detects something. And this specific file actually detected their named pipe attacks, okay? None of that's relevant if you don't know what that means. That's fine. It doesn't matter. All you need to know is that they pushed this file right here, C0000291, and then if you actually look, and then it would look like this, C0000291 dash, and then there'd be another octet, so another 8 numbers or something like that, and those would be random. Those would be based on your system time, all that stuff. So those are random after that. That's why they put here and then ends with a sys. And if you look at the original documentation, they put an asterisk in there. So this is the first thing. That's the file that actually they pushed to the systems. And when that happened, it blue screened all the systems. Now, how did it do that? Well, it actually triggered a logic error. What that means is the system had no idea what to do with it. So it was causing logical errors and crashing the system because something is supposed to happen and the system has no idea what to do, so it crashes. This is called a logic error. Now, that's neither here nor there. That's just what happened. You don't have to understand it. We'll talk about it more. You can see, okay, that's just saying that this is by CrowdStrike, by the way. This is their information. Now, their remediation, we'll talk about their remediation steps here shortly because kind of piss poor, personally. So there's a couple of things to take away here. Once you know how or what happened, once you know that, okay, the systems are blue screened, a lot of people in tech, especially leaders, because I was in these meetings, right? I was in these conversations. I was, most of you guys know I'm a leader in this industry, and I was in these meetings, and a lot of people didn't quite understand the technical aspect of this. What I mean is, most of the time you have a patch get applied or something happens and you can be like, roll it back, you couldn't do that here for two reasons. One, the system is blue screened. What that means is I can't access it. I would have to manually log on to that system, restart that system and access the system in safe mode to access it. That's the only way. Right? I can't push anything to it. It's not up. The system is not up, essentially. It is not running. So I can't push anything to it. So even if we had a fix instantly, or CrowdStrike did, they can't push it to the machines. They can't take back what they did. So that's why this impact was so big, because most of the time you can. Most of the time you can say, oh, shoot, we pushed an update, it crashed something, roll it back, and then we're good. Well, you could have done that with these servers, but you would have had to roll back from backups, meaning you can't just take the patch away, or you can't take the update away, or you can't just fix it or do a workaround. The system is completely down. It's crashed. It's like having the system turned off. Someone has to manually turn it on. So that's the first takeaway, because that's the biggest impact, because I'll tell you, I worked this for quite some time, and even if you had a script to do it, right? I saw some tools come out that would do it for you and stuff. Those, you still have to manually do it, right? The system is down. You can't reach it. You can't send that tool there. You have to plug that tool in. You have to go and use that tool. It might change or delete the file for you and everything. Cool. But if I'm already on the machine, I can do that myself. I don't need to buy a tool to do that. So that's the first piece, is like the biggest piece of this is because they couldn't take it back. There was no remediation at the time. That's number one. Number two, the biggest piece to take away here was the fact that this kind of, I don't want to say brought awareness, it kind of exposed the fact that so many companies use CrowdStrike. I got a lot of people around me that aren't cyber people that are asking, well, why does there so many systems down? Why do so many people use this? Why blah, blah. It shows how good CrowdStrike is compared to the others in the industry. Now, there's a couple of competitors that are getting there, but CrowdStrike's still the leading competition in the industry. So it's tough to say CrowdStrike, nobody's going to use CrowdStrike anymore. I don't see that happening, because the reality is they're still number one. They made one of the biggest errors of all time, but they're still number one in the industry. So I don't know that that's going to happen either. So it's kind of a sticky situation, because if you're a company that's using them, you don't want to, but they're the best. So it's like, man, what do I do here? So that's another piece that people aren't thinking of that's kind of interesting. The third piece of this is you had to have people that could manually fix this. There was no automated fix. So you had, the fix was to boot the system in safe mode. Okay, boot it in safe mode, go in, then delete the file manually, and then restart the system. Well, there's a couple problems with that. One, if you've ever booted VMs, right, you have to have people that know what's going on, know how systems work. What I mean by that is, if you go to your physical computer at home right now and you boot it, you'll see a pop-up when it's starting up that says press whatever, F8, F12, whatever, escape to boot or to view boot menu or whatever. All systems are slightly different. So you do that, and then you can boot into safe mode, right? The options there. Easy peasy, right? Not everyone knows that, right? So if you're not an IT savvy person, you don't know that. So if you wake up in the morning and boom, your system's blue screen, you don't know anything about it, and then you get instructions that say boot into safe mode, that doesn't mean anything to you. So that's where a lot of people struggle. Second piece, even if you do know how to do that, right? If you're doing it in VMware, and I'm sure a lot of sysads out there are watching this video, have you ever tried to boot a VM into BIOS settings or boot menus or anything? Guess what? That pop-up that says press F12, F8, whatever, it goes like that fast. It goes instantly by the screen, and you miss it, you have to restart the server again and do it again. So you have to add, and maybe some of you guys out there will say, no, you didn't have to. I understand you don't have to. But if you want to do it for a lot of systems, you would have to add a boot delay. What that means is it shows that menu longer, and you have to do that in VMware or whatever ESXi, any other hypervisor you're using. You have to add a boot delay. Otherwise, VMs just boot instantly, so you're not going to get to that safe menu. Then there's the third piece of that, which is the cloud solutions, right? Azure, AWS, all of these systems. When you rent a server in AWS or Azure, do you have physical access to it? No. So how can I fix that machine? I can't, right? So what was the solution? The solution was to unmount. It depends on whether you're talking Azure or AWS, but AWS, the solution was to unmount the actual hard drive, right? The volume, take it, mount it to another computer, delete the file itself, remount it back to the server, and then restart it. Why? Because you can't physically get access to that machine. So what do you do if you're a company? Do you hope that you have enough tech-savvy people to stand all your servers back up in time? Do you hope that AWS eventually fixes them all for you? You have to completely keep doing business, so that's a huge impact. Azure was even worse. Azure made you take the volume and stand up a whole new VM. And some of these fixes have come and gone, meaning like that might not be the fix at the time I post this video because the fixes are changing. Some of them, like I said, there's tools coming out, but the reality is that was the immediate fix. And if you're a business, you need up immediately, right? You can't wait until someone creates a fix. I need up immediately. So those are some of the big things to consider as we talk about this, because I'm kind of deep diving into this and I want to deep dive into it because there's a lot of considerations that people don't think about. So let me pull up, I had some other things here I want to pull up. So firstly, here's what happened, right? We know that. One thing I want to talk about is, look at this. Overnight, several states, including Alaska, Arizona, experienced 911 outages. So you couldn't use 911. Hospitals started having outages. Airlines. Now here it says where was it? A bunch of flights were grounded. I'm trying to look for the exact number. I think I had it somewhere right here. So 46,000 flights were delayed and more than 5,000 were canceled. That's just on day one. That number's grown. Last I checked, it was like 25,000 flights have been canceled, right? That number's still growing because flights have been canceled, delayed, etc. Think of how much impact to financial situations that these airlines are handling right now because of this. Okay, that's huge. That's huge. Now, I want to show you guys something real fast. Well, if I go to Google and type in, and I say I want to do who's getting fired at, okay, there's that CrowdStrike because that's what I typed in earlier, but I want to type in impact of, and look at that. If I start typing, you see that it says, and I can't remember the exact thing I typed earlier, but you see that it says Microsoft outage. Do you see that? So one thing I want to point out is if you actually go to Google's searches, the majority of them are searching for Microsoft outage. Now, this is something I really want to point out because the first reports of this, so I'll just tell you guys, I have alerting on the systems I work with. I have alerting on them to tell me when they're down. So I knew about this the second it happened. So what I mean by that is I was on within, I don't know how fast, but it was less than 30 minutes. I was online working this issue. Now, one thing to take away is if you looked at some of the first things that were published, and I know this because I was there working it, looking for answers, and found the first reports were Microsoft has an outage. Microsoft. I keep saying it like that because one thing to think about here is what are the implications, okay? So let's look at Microsoft stock. Look at that. Look at that. So look at CrowdStrike stock, okay? On July 18th, here's July 18th. Okay, Microsoft stock dropped drastically. It's down almost 4% in the last 5 days, right? See this spike here? Look at how far that spike dropped. You know how much money they lost there? Because they were blamed for this? And I still talk to people that are not in IT, not in cyber, that say, yeah, do you see Microsoft had such issues? They still believe that it's a Microsoft problem. And it's not. It has absolutely nothing to do with Microsoft. Nothing to do with them. CrowdStrike did this, not Microsoft. That needs to be very clear. Okay? Now, once that happened, you can see, look at this. Between 6 and 7 a.m., the White House investigates and global banks report the issues. 6 and 7 a.m. If any of you know anything about this incident, it occurred at 12:40 a.m. It took the White House and these banks 6 or 7 hours to notice that their systems are down, right? That may not seem like a big deal, but that means 6 or 7 hours where companies like mine and myself, we were working through it. We fixed it. We were past it, right? They woke up to it. So you're down and you got some serious issues, right? Now you're trying to fix it. Now you're trying to get, and then there's federal agencies getting involved. I mean, it got very crazy. But the biggest takeaway is the timelines are a little bit messed up. If you do different articles, they say different times. Around 12:40 to 12:45-ish, 1 a.m.-ish Central Time, somewhere in that ballpark was when this happened. When the system, it depends on if you look, you can look at the files themselves and see when it was modified and see when the time exactly was. But around that time frame is when it happened, right? So some people just rolled back, meaning they literally just took their disaster recovery and they said, hey, everything crashed, roll back to the last known good state. The problem with that was at the time, if you did it too fast, CrowdStrike was just going to update it again and crash it again. Now, CrowdStrike did eventually come out and say, hey, you shouldn't have that issue anymore. No more systems should crash. So here's where I have some curiosities for myself. One, who's actually going to be held liable for this? Is it going to be CrowdStrike? Is there going to be legal ramifications? You saw down here or up here, their stock prices dropped insane amount, 18% in the last 5 days. So that's one implication, right? They lose a shitload of money. But what about Microsoft? What about the banks? What about the airports? What about the agencies? What about the White House? What about all these entities that lost money, right? Think about the man hours it took to fix this because CrowdStrike couldn't touch these systems anymore. They couldn't fix it. You had to fix it. Think about that. Now, one thing I want to point out, and I'm using my phone just because I need to look at the time a call came in. So looking at my phone, I think is this it? Yeah, this is it. So I received a call from CrowdStrike at 12:07 p.m. 12:07 p.m. I'd been working on this problem for almost 12 hours at this point. Think about that. Your business is down for 12 hours. If you're a large scale company, that's millions to billions of dollars. We're down for 12 hours and you call to see if you can help 12 hours later. That's not a good look. That's tough. I get it. You had a lot of people to call and you had a lot of stuff going on. So maybe some people got calls earlier. Some might have got later, right? They're making calls all day. But that's another piece. If you're one of those later calls, I might be like, I'm switching. Screw this, right? It just depends on where you're at in your business. I'll tell you one thing, companies like Microsoft Defender, things like that, they're looking a lot better, right? So on one hand, Microsoft is hurting from this because it's affecting their bottom dollar. On the other hand, Microsoft has a direct competitor to this as well, and they're starting to go, maybe we can leverage this, right? So that's one thing. One thing I want to point out is the 8.5 million systems as it continues to grow. Now, like I said, the one thing I want to talk about is who is responsible for this, because there's going to be people fired. I mean, if you don't fire somebody, that's I don't know what to say. Somebody's got to get fired for this, right? For maybe your QA, I don't know. Someone who tested this, right, has to be fired. There's still systems down. I mean, it's wild. Let's see. But this right here, this is the big piece. The broad economic and societal impacts reflect the use of CrowdStrike by enterprises that run many critical services. So what this says is less than 1% of all Windows machines, 8.5 million, less than 1%. A lot of people would say, well, that's not a huge impact. But almost every one of them is a critical piece. Why? Because you don't put CrowdStrike, an extremely expensive tool, on your home computer. You don't. It's not that serious. If your home computer gets hacked and crashed and all that, you trash it and you buy a new one, or you rewipe it, whatever. But you can't do that, these critical systems. So 8.5 million may not seem like much, but they're critical. 8.5 million critical systems is a big deal. And that's what happened, right? Now, here CrowdStrike CEO Kurtz takes on social media and promises full transparency. I'll be honest with you. That's just political jargon, meaning he's saying stuff, not buying it. Why? Because you weren't transparent at the time. And I'm a huge, if you guys are in the Discord, you know I'm a huge CrowdStrike person. I love CrowdStrike. I still think it's the best in the industry. But I think this humbled a lot of them. I think, honestly, it showed some problems. Some of the problems are how widespread they are, because they almost monopolize the critical infrastructure. As we see, we need to change that as a company, or not as a company, I'm sorry, as a profession. We need to change that. We need to spread that. The other piece is, honestly, is that I don't know what's going to happen at CrowdStrike, because for instance, if all these companies sue, right, for damages, for all this, Microsoft for defamation. I mean, any of these companies, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if they even can. I don't know the legal ramifications, implications, any of that. But if these companies sue, I mean, they could bankrupt CrowdStrike if they win. So I honestly don't know what happens in the long term of this. And that's what's a little bit alarming. Think about things like this. Blood centers, which rely on shipping companies like FedEx, say they're experiencing delays, which may be down, blah, blah. So the delay should not cause any shortages unless the problem persists. So if the problem persists, there could be delays in surgeries and things like that. That's wild. I mean, that's wild. I saw the quote, and I'm sure many of you guys have seen it, that this was what Y2K was supposed to be. It's true. This is, bar none, the largest IT outage ever recorded. It may not be the largest in terms of machines down, I don't know, but it's by far the most impactful in my opinion. It's absolutely wild to me. It blows my mind. It's insane. The last piece I want to touch on, and this is where I'll leave you guys because I want you guys to, I'm fully transparent, unlike some companies, and that's not a diss necessarily to CrowdStrike, but I will say I was very disappointed in certain handlings of it. The first thing is, the first article that was released was actually, I'm not going to say by who because it was incorrect. It was, the first article released that I saw was that Microsoft had an outage. That was incorrect. It was not Microsoft's issue. The reason that's important is because that changed how we troubleshot the issue for a long time. 2, once CrowdStrike finally was reported the issue, CrowdStrike was not the one that reported it was the issue. What do I mean by that? Is there were many sites that had the fix and the reported issue before CrowdStrike released it publicly. And 3, okay, they did not reach out to their customers first and say, here's the fix. They didn't. Maybe if you're a customer of theirs, and tell me please in the comments, if you're a customer of theirs and they did reach out to you first, please hit that comment and tell me, because I'm a customer of theirs. They didn't reach out. I submitted a ticket to them. I already knew the issue and I already was fixing it based on other sites. I submitted a ticket to them, and you know what they did? They just continued to send me links. And they sent the same link over and over. It was to their knowledge center that showed the same steps that other websites had already published. If I'm a company, I make one of the biggest mistakes in recorded history. It's not a good look that the customer had to reach out to me, for 1, to get a solution. For 2, I'm not even going to spend time talking to them. I'm not even going to give them a proper response. I'm just going to link it. Doesn't look great for customer service, because what if something like this happens again? I can't rely on them. What if this was more serious? What if it wasn't such an easy fix? Am I supposed to just hope I understand your knowledge article and keep on moving? Hopefully. I mean, there's a ton of implications to this, and I don't think we're going to see them all right now. I think it's going to be a little bit more widespread. I don't know. Again, there's so many legal questions I have because I'm not a lawyer and I don't know the legalities. But, I mean, there might be a case for monopolization here. I mean, we see the impact here of how monopolized the environments were with CrowdStrike. I don't know that even applies here, but man, it sure seems like it. And this is just a wild one, man. And it's wild. And, you know, I apologize for not having a video earlier, but again, I've been exhausted. I've been working, trying to get this stuff back up. I can safely report that, you know, I believe we're okay now. But man, is it, this one was a big fuck up. I'm going to be honest with you. Big one. Yeah, big one. The other thing I want to say, again, lastly, is some of the wordage was so bad on here. Like this is Business Insider. Microsoft said the outage had affected blah, blah. Where was it? Maybe it's not this one. One of them said specifically that a software update by Global Security. Hate that. I hate that. Maybe it's because I'm a technical person, but I hate that you said it's a software update, because it wasn't. What I mean is, a software update could have been prevented, because a lot of companies will test before they push a new update. So a software update would have allowed the companies to control that update and test it. This was not a software update. This was a configuration file update that you pushed out without alerting anybody. I understand your system does this multiple times a day. I get that. But to call it a software update is not fair. because you're putting a little bit of that emphasis on the, if you're an IT person, you know that software updates should be tested. So you're kind of putting a little bit of the blame on the people, whether you mean to or not. I don't think they mean to by saying that. I just think they don't fully understand what they're saying. But it's just I just don't like the wording. There was a lot of miscommunication on this one. There was a lot of Microsoft's fault. There was a lot of everybody's down. There was just a ton of misinformation, a lot of stuff. But man, this was a crazy one, guys. I don't want to just sit here and beat a dead horse. I want to talk about this one. So if you're in the Discord, hit me up in there, add comments or something in the chat, general chat. I want to talk about this one. I want to know your guys' impacts, your guys' thoughts, your guys' everything. If you're not in the Discord, you can join it. Feel free. The link's in the description. The Patreon, you can join there. We actually have a chat room in the Patreon where we can chat directly. And then also, just in the comments, just tell me something that you guys know about this, because I have a feeling with something this widespread like this, every single person that was a part of it has a different perspective on it. And what I mean is, think of how different it would be, my perspective, if the system went down, or not the system went down, I'm sorry, if I woke up to it at 8 a.m. instead of getting called in the middle of the night. If I woke up to it at 8 a.m., got a call at 9 a.m. from CrowdStrike telling me how to fix it, and then I went ahead and started fixing it. That's a pretty pleasant, I mean, it's not good, still looks bad, it's still going to take me a long time to fix them, but that's more of a pleasant way of handling something for me, right? Because I woke up and I went, oh no, my day's just gone to shit, and then I get a call, hey, here's how we fix it, you don't have to research, we got you. And then I start fixing it, and I can give those instructions to a few people, and we can start knocking these out. But when you notice it at 1 a.m., you don't hear anything for 12 hours, that doesn't look good, man. And so everybody's perspective is going to be different, because everybody got called at a different time. Everybody got a different way of handling it. Everybody did different things. Some people probably had a few missed troubleshooting steps, right? And thought they could fix it themselves and do some things. And we were trying some stuff too. And so I'm sure everybody's perspective is a little different, but please let me know what you guys think. Thank you guys. Hit the like button, hit the sub button. It helps out tremendously. Have a great day. And if you're affected by it, please take a break, relax. Let's get past it. Let's move on, guys. Thanks.